Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps and a big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. We'll recap the story of the 2017 movie Psyche Kusuo. 16 years ago, a couple who had been trying to get pregnant finally managed to have their first child and named him Psyche Kusuo. Although his parents were completely normal, the pink-haired boy was born with super abilities. He learned to talk at just 10 days old and could levitate at one. Even though they found it very strange, the couple believed it was some kind of blessing and decided not to take him to a laboratory, choosing instead to raise him themselves. Because of this, Psyche had a fairly comfortable childhood, but now that he's a teenager, his powers have become a curse. Even though he's nearly omnipotent, the boy can't use his powers to win money at casinos since he'd definitely get arrested for. Plus, his ability to read minds doesn't make it any easier to win over girls, since they aren't always thinking about romantic things, which can ruin them. It turns out that with such crazy powers, Psyche can do almost anything, and life ends up getting extremely easy. So easy that it loses all. Because of this, Kusuo feels extremely unlucky and does everything possible to look normal, getting average grades and always placing third or fourth in competition. To make matters worse, the boy can't control his abilities, so he uses a pair of antennae on his head to stabilize his powers so he doesn't accidentally destroy them. But because of this, Psyche is forced to hypnotize his classmates so they don't notice the objects on it. At school, the teacher announces that the annual PK High School Festival, will take place next month and warns everyone to behave, because if they get into trouble, there will be no more events next. Although he thinks the festival is stupid, Kusuo always takes the opportunity to get away from the crowd and spend some time. Since he doesn't want to miss this, he decides to make sure nothing goes wrong during the event. After the teacher finishes speaking, another student named Hiro comes to the front of the class and announces he'll be the class representative in charge of designing the activity they'll do for the festival. Nevertheless, they're in a democracy, and the class doesn't accept his idea of having an origami exhibition. Instead, they decide to collect oddly shaped stones around campus and present them to the other class. After class, Nendo, a rather odd-looking boy with a chin like Uncle Grandpa, sneaks up behind Psyche and covers his eyes, surprising the teller. Because of his abilities, Kusuo can sense the presence of anyone who approaches from at least 200 meters away. But because Nendo's mind is completely blank, Psyche never detects him and always gets caught off. As soon as Psyche notices him, the Asian Crimson Chin invites him to go rock hunting. Kusuo tries to refuse but is interrupted by Shun, a completely delusional boy who believes a secret society called Dark Reunion is trying to destroy the world. Afraid someone might be listening in, the weirdo drags the two of them to the roof and reveals that he found a letter from the organization in his closet, promising they'll attack during the festival. Even though he doesn't know about Kusuo's powers, Shun asks for help dealing with the New World Order, and Psyche pretends to accept, even though he's sure none of it is. 1 week before the PK festival, Kusuo is sitting at his desk when he overhears a conversation in a girls' circle where an overly popular girl named Kokomi Teruhashi is encouraged by her friends to enter the Miss PK contest, which will pick the prettiest girl in the school. Despite being extremely vain, Teruhashi pretends she has no chance and recommends another friend participate. Meanwhile, in her mind, Psyche can see she doesn't want to join because she thinks she'd win. Listening to everything going through her mind, Kusuo says he's not attracted to Kokomi, but she seems interested in him since he ignored her when they met on vacation. On that day, Teruhashi greeted Psyche in the park, thinking he'd spend all summer thinking about her. But since he only gave a casual greeting and didn't sigh over her, the girl was completely outraged. Thinking he couldn't respond properly because he was stunned by her beauty, she decides to greet him again. But this time Kusuo decides to ignore her, leaving her even more. Finding it impossible for someone not to be interested in her, Kokomi assumes Psyche thought he was hallucinating and decides to talk to him one more time, this time touching him to make sure she isn't a mirage. But when she tries, Kusuo sidesteps her and continues on his way as usual, getting out of sight and teleporting away from her. Shortly after, once she notices he's disappeared, Teruhashi thinks it was all a hallucination and takes this as a sign that she's in love with him, becoming obsessed and trying to get close in all sorts of ways, but is always rejected. On the day of the festival, Psyche is having breakfast with his parents when a cup suddenly breaks, which makes his mother think it's some kind of bad. But since he is not believing in such things, Kusuo decides to just ignore it and walk to the festival calmly, planning to use his powers to avoid any incidents before the event begins. The whole gang gathers one last time and shows off the various stones they found, but the one that stands out the most is Aaron Kuboyasu's, which has a reddish. Upon seeing the object, Kusuo remembers that Aaron is a former delinquent who recently transferred to PK High School to change his life. But despite trying to hide his criminal past, he acts like a madman whenever he... Imagining that the ink is actually blood, Saiki goes back to the corridor, where he continues to be pursued by Teruhashi, who plans to create several coincidences for them to be... Without realizing that the boy can read her mind and already knows everything she's up. Excited about her plans, Kokomi decides to talk to Saiki. But just as she tries to call him, a group of crazed people show up and introduce themselves as members of Teruhashi's fan club, begging her to participate in the Miss PK contest. Taking advantage of her distraction, Kusuo decides to teleport outside and ends up at the magic show of Uryoku, a student from another class. Seeing that the boy is using his own mother as an assistant, Saiki feels that something could go wrong and decides to stay there to help if... When the show begins, the magician explains that he'll be tied up and placed in a box with chains, having 3 minutes to get out before his assistant starts sticking blades through the hole. Hearing about the illusion, Saiki thinks there's a great chance this will go wrong and teleports into the box to get the magician out. But Uryoku has already managed to perform the trick and is no longer in... Since he has to wait 10 minutes between each teleport, Kusuo just watches as the illusionist's mother pierces the box with her blades, forcing him to squirm to avoid being... After 3 minutes have passed, Saiki breathes a sigh of relief that he managed to dodge the swords when Uryoku's mother announces that they'll use a crane to drop the box from a height of 30 meters. When the cable breaks, the audience watches, expecting the boy to turn into mashed potato. But at the last second before the box hits the ground, Saiki manages to avoid damage by jumping at the moment of impact, completely ignoring an... As if all this madness wasn't enough, Uryoku's mother throws a gallon of fuel into the box and decides to set it on fire, forcing Kusuo to freeze the object from the inside, stopping the flames from... Completely insane. The old woman says that they'll now smash the box with a steamroller, but just as the machine is about to hit him, Saiki realizes that the 10 minutes have passed and he can teleport away. Just then, the magician reappears on top of the stage, drawing the crowd's attention, while Saiki pops up across the courtyard, thinking about how close he came to being... Meanwhile, on the other side of the school, Teruhashi gives in to her fan club's request and decides to participate in the beauty contest. But as a judge, which leaves all the boys pretty frustrated, Shun turns away from the crowd and starts walking toward the back of the school when one of the Dark Reunion members appears and starts talking to him, leading him to the group's meeting place. There, the boy meets the other members and is introduced to Moonlight Butterfly, the leader of the group, who claims that Shun is a former member of Dark Reunion. At this point, the boy reveals that he was once one of the most respected warriors of the squad, but deserted when he learned their true plans, stole the Stone of Destruction, and has been pursued ever since. Because of this, he was forced to use a forbidden spell to become a spirit and infiltrate Shun's. Still, the cult leader says he can forgive him and offers Shun a chance to return to... But since the boy refuses, Moonlight Butterfly sees no other option but to use his powerful laser pen against the former. At this point, the leader of Dark Reunion reveals that there are 7 sacred spheres on campus that are capable of destroying the group, and that they've come to the school precisely to destroy these objects, making Shun promise to find them and eliminate the sect before they hurt anyone else. Meanwhile, Hiro is inviting people to the school marathon when Nendo appears behind him, saying that he also wants to participate in the race, which will give the winner the right to watch Kokomi for 10 minutes. Worried that someone will get hurt, Kusuo follows the marathon runners, who are safe for a while, but refusing to lose to Nendo, Hiro starts running wildly, crossing the sign and almost getting hit by cars. Despite seeming lazy, Nendo is extremely fast and can catch up with the red-haired Rock Lee with ease, managing to keep up with him while eating a can of corn. Refusing to lose, Hiro keeps running wildly through the streets, forcing Kusuo to use his psychokinesis to alter the traffic lights and make the cars levitate over his... Still, Nendo catches up with him and says he took a break to buy another drink, offering a can of bean soup to his friend, but Hiro refuses to accept. The boy eats the canned food while running backwards, managing to keep his advantage. Near the finish line, Hiro decides to take drastic measures and tells him there's a sumo wrestler on the other side of the... His friend stops to watch, and so Hiro wins the marathon with this dirty... When he realizes he's been tricked, the Asian Crimson Chin decides to take revenge and uses the 1,000 Years of Death jutsu on Hiro, making everyone laugh. Inside the school, Aran Kuboyasu opens his locker and finds a letter from his old gang, calling him to meet across campus. Since he's pretty different now, Kuboyasu decides to walk right past his old crew, laughing because they can't recognize. At that moment, Shun Kaidu walks by carrying 2 bowling balls and catches the attention of the delinquents, who ask him if he knows any Kuboya. As soon as he hears the name, Shun immediately points to Aaron, who tells him to get lost. Left alone with the delinquents, Kuboyasu says he doesn't have time to play around, but the gang leader swings his bat at him, only to awaken the wild instincts of the former delinquent, who starts beating them up with his bare hand. Meanwhile, Saiki Kusuo is still worried about potential incidents at the festival, but since Kokomi Teruhashi manages to find him and won't let go of him, he's forced to give in and accepts her invitation to the haunted house, where she plans to stick. As the two pass by Koro-sensei's room, Nendo approaches and offers to tag along, ruining Kokomi's plans to be alone with the protagonist. Inside, Teruhashi pretends to be super scared while Kusuo stays calm. After all, he can see the other students through the wall. At the end of one hallway, a boy tries to scare the group but faints when he sees the size of Nendo's chin, leaving them free to steal some props and pretend to be ghosts. After leaving the haunted house, the two boys go to wash up, and Nendo ends up stealing Saiki's glasses, activating his power that turns anyone who looks at him to. Knowing his friend will only return to normal after 24 hours, Saiki decides to drop him off at his class's rock exhibit, drawing everyone's attention. To avoid more trouble, Kusuo calls his mom and asks her to find his spare glasses in his room. But since she's terrified of her son's mess, she refuses to go in, and he has to solve this on it. While searching the school for other glasses, Saiki ends up petrifying several students. Not knowing what else to do, Kusuo decides to hide in the gym storage room and finds Teruhashi inside, who seems to be up to something. Since he's in a hurry, he ignores her and asks her to leave him alone. But as soon as she does, Saiki realizes Kuboyasu is still fighting out. Seeing Kusuo watching, Aaron says he was just doing some weightlifting and tries to play it cool, but when he realizes Kusuo doesn't care and just wants the glasses, he hands them over to keep him cool. Finally able to see again, Saiki realizes a teacher is coming and quickly heals the delinquents, reversing their petrification so they can escape. He warns Aaron that he knows about his past and will tell everyone if he causes trouble. After handling this, Saiki uses his powers to do a kind of substitution to get his glasses back, ending the risk of petrifying anyone. Thinking his troubles are finally over, Saiki gets ready to teleport away and relax. But Teruhashi shows up again and invites him to a couple. Not interested at all, he rejects her and prepares to leave, but before he can, Kokomi's fan club appears, threatening to eliminate him for hanging around her too. At this point, Teruhashi steps in and distracts the fanboys so Saiki can run. But they don't give up and chase the two, cornering them in the gym storage room and gluing the lock. Once inside, Kusuo starts reading Kokomi's thoughts and discovers this was her plan all along. In fact, Teruhashi set up the marathon, the dark reunion, and Kuboyasu's challenge, all just to keep Saiki away from his friend. Finally, she forced her fan club to chase them and lock them up with superglue so they could be alone without anyone interfering. While Saiki tries to think of a way out without exposing his powers, Shun manages to gather 7 bowling balls and takes them to the Dark Reunion's hideout, which is really just a bunch of Kokomi fans in disguise. As soon as he arrives, the group leader begs him not to use the sacred spheres, or they'll be destroyed. But that's exactly what Shun plans to do. After setting the balls in place, he starts a ritual and the cult members run away in all directions, leaving Shun alone, thinking he's finally defeated the organization. Outside, the delinquents return with the rest of the gang and start threatening Kuboyasu, who can't see them and doesn't know what's happening. From the gym, Saiki notices the group and tries to figure out how to prevent disaster. But since he's stuck inside and can't get out without Teruhashi getting suspicious, he decides to rewind time for the whole group, making them disappear in front of everyone. After using so much energy to save Kuboyasu, Saiki is completely exhausted and collapses. But this ends up affecting his telekinetic powers, and Kokomi snaps out of hypnosis, finally noticing the antennae in his head. Strangely enough, the girl starts fiddling with the object and removes one of the antennae, causing of Saiki's power being released all at once. Because of this, sensors all over the planet start to malfunction, and error messages pop up everywhere, even on the space station, warning that the world is about to. At that moment, Saiki wakes up and tries to lean against a wooden object, instantly disintegrating. Seeing this, Kokomi Teruhashi is startled and accidentally drops the antenna, which falls somewhere in the warehouse. As soon as he realizes something is missing from his head, Saiki turns to Kokomi and asks for the object. But the room freezes before she can find it, making the guys suspect they're no longer. With no other choice, Kusuo decides to wait for Teruhashi to pass out from the thin air and finally starts to act, using his abilities to recover the antenna and bring the building back. But his problems aren't over. After all this chaos, Psyche knows there's no way to explain himself, so he decides to use the rest of his power to rewind time by a whole day, forcing himself to relive the festival and keep everyone safe, while dealing with Kokomi's advances and making sure he does everything right this. So, this is the end of the movie. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.